Oh, there you go. There's some water. This is pretty hilarious. Hopefully the audio comes through. This whole back seat cushion's full of water. Oh, there we go. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Chasing 518. Today, I bought a boat that's sunk. What do you think of this boat? Can we fix it?
I don't know. Looks pretty wet.
This boat was all the way submerged up to about the steering wheel in the lake, tied to its dock. Got a smoking deal on this 2001 Reinell 205, 20.5 foot, I guess. It's got a 5.0 small block Chevy, the Penta, and it's full of water. Okay, day one on the boat resurrection. It's you can see the milky oil water mess right there. Dipstick's full and gross. There's so much oil in the engine compartment, I'm guessing it probably floated it all out and it's just a big slimy mess. But the guy didn't even clean out his old towels and jackets and stuff. And, oh, there you go. There's some water. So yeah, start cleaning it out. I'm gonna take the battery out, see if it'll charge. I think these Optimos are completely sealed and waterproof, so it should come back to life. Let's get it out of there. Let's see if this battery's got any juice. 11.9, not too bad. Put it on a cycle here. All right, see if it comes back to life. I think the boat's been out of the water for a couple of months. So I'm going to pull all the spark plugs and just see if water comes shooting out or what. I don't know what I'm in for yet. Oh, there we go. There we go, there's the water. I must have an open valve. There it is. Yummy. It's definitely not rusty yet. I think I'll drain the oil. I thought about with as dirty and disgusting as the bilge is, maybe just draining the oil right into it and letting it run out the back, but the dipstick looks like it's threaded into the drain plug, so I'll just evacuate it out of here. Yeah, this is pretty hilarious. Hopefully the audio comes through. This whole back seat cushion's full of water. Not sure if I can figure out how to drain it, or I should just poke a little hole in the bottom. I've already filled this fluid pump up twice with just dirty lake water. straight out of the crankcase. Working on number 4 now. Finally, on bucket 5, I'm getting some milkshake here. This hose was clear, now it's definitely milky with oil. Let's see how many buckets of milk I get out of this thing. First look in the carburetor. I need to disconnect this if I want to be able to run it here. It still works. I think it's just full of water. Pull the carburetor and take it apart and clean it. I gotta pump the gas tank out still. Looks like I could siphon it out of here. Get a new fuel filter. Yeah, we definitely gotta pump all the water out of the gas tank. This is the gas that I've been pumping out of the boat so far. So this is the first container full that I pulled out, and you can see that the gas is sitting on water, and even the gas is pretty funky. This is the second batch, and there's just a little bit down here, I think some oil residue, and I'm not sure what, that was still coming out of the drain can. And then here's the next batch, and this actually looks like gas and smells like gas. So if that third container doesn't have any separation after a couple hours, I think I'll just keep putting gas in that, and whatever comes out from that point on, I'll probably just pour in my truck, honestly, because I think it's close enough that it'll dilute out and run, and at least in something that gets run every day, it can tolerate if there's just a touch of moisture still in there. I know it's not the best thing to do, but it's also a good way to get rid of hazmat, I think. Gotten the last of the gas out, so it looks like maybe it had, I don't know, somewhere between like 8 and 10 gallons in it. I think this is good gas now that I've gotten all the watery gas out, but I don't know how old it is, and it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna pour it in my truck. But what I am gonna do right now is I've got 3 gallons of fresh gas here at home, so I'm gonna pour that in the tank, and then I'm gonna siphon a little bit more just to pull fresh gas through the tank, the pump, the tank pickup, and get it clean up to where I've disconnected this hose, which is right before the filter. That way I know that part of the fuel system's good. So pour a little bit more gas in and siphon a little bit out. Now that all the spark plugs are out, and I've squirted penetrating oil and Marvel Mystery Oil and WD-40 into the spark plug holes, I've got all the oil drained. I really want to turn the engine over by hand. And traditionally on a car, you would do that putting a ratchet on the crank pulley, the crankshaft bolt, but there's the freshwater water pump sits on the crank of a boat. It's a good idea to check the condition of those impellers in there anyway, so I think I'll take this apart and see if I can get to a point where I can put a ratchet on the crank pulley, and then it'll also let me inspect this water pump impeller that's inside here. Okay, here's the water pump. Those are rubber vanes. So this is splined off the front of the crank. And then this housing is stationary. It's got a little keeper block that holds it here, and then an inlet and an outlet hose. And these are all supposed to be biased one direction, but I was spinning it back and forth to get it access to the bolts and get it off, so a couple of them flop over. I'm pretty sure there's an orientation, a directional. You're supposed to put these in, so when I put it back on, I'll look that up, because I can't remember if they're all supposed to be bent this way or the other way or what. And then you put it on, because you don't want them to have to flip over like that in the engine. All right, I'll see if I can maybe even just get lucky and put like a 12-point socket on the front of the whatever that drive is, and maybe I can turn the motor over with that. A 14 fits on that spline drive. It's a little loose, but let's just lean on it and see if the engine rolls over. Oh yeah. All right. comes all the fluid. Okay, well that's awesome. That's great. That, I mean, the rings weren't even, you know, they hadn't rusted to the cylinder walls yet at all. I barely leaned on that with the length of a wrench, turning all the belts, you know, alternator, power steering pump, water pump. The outdrive's connected, at least, you know, through the gearbox to neutral, and I was able to do it with one wrench. So obviously the motor didn't rust up, which is great. I'm gonna pull the belts now because I want to take a look at the alternator, and I want to drain the power steering system and the power trim hydraulic system, but I don't want to circulate. You know, he never cranked the engine over in this thing after it got water in it, so I don't want to, even by hand, I don't want to pump milky power steering fluid through the system. I want to just start draining it, so pull that belt off. Got the fuel system all cleaned out. Wanted to just take a quick look in the carburetor. Just a Holley 2-barrel, so there's only a metering plate and a bowl on the front, and there's a little bit of, I don't know, whatever that is, but it doesn't look bad. Power valve moves, the needle works for the float assembly. I could pop those jets out, make sure they're clean, but I think I'll just get some carb cleaner and blow this out and look for a Holley bowl gasket. I don't think I have one of those. Pulled the cap on the distributor. The rotor looks good. The cap looks fine. There's a little bit of rust. And then the little felt to hold the oil to lubricate the centrifugal advance. I pulled that out, so I'm gonna put some oil down in there. I'll let this dry out, maybe blow it out with some compressed air, hit it with some electronics cleaner or something. So I've got a few things to go get at the parts store. Electronics cleaner, bowl gasket, and now I'm gonna get all the belts off. Alternator's super quiet, it's not gunked up or nothing. So I'm gonna drain what's left in the power steering, and then that's the trim motor and its reservoir, and it looks like strawberry milkshake, so I'm gonna pump that out too. And then at some point I need to check the lower drive oil. It should be all sealed up because it's supposed to be in the water all the time, so it should be fine if it's you know, was in good working condition before. Typically, if you're like your lower drive oil's milky, it's a sign that your propeller, your prop shaft seal is no good. We'll check that to make sure, and man, everything's looking really good so far. So probably some electrical connections, you know, anything I can access I should unplug and wire brush, Scotch-Brite, put some dielectric grease on and plug back in, but it's looking pretty good. I bet once I get all my supplies and a oil filter, fuel filter, I bet this thing fires up when I'm ready. Great first day working on the boat. We learned that the motor's not frozen. Got 7 gallons of water out of the engine. Got a couple gallons of water out of the gas tank. Pulled the spark plugs and fountains of water came out. I think I'm in really good shape. So I'm gonna make a parts run. I gotta get like a Holley carburetor gasket, get some electronics cleaner, get some oil, get filters. I think I'm even gonna try the spark plugs that it has and see if they have spark. They look fine. So off to a good start. Boat day 2. All right, I'm gonna pull the starter out today. I went ahead and just kind of vacuumed myself a little spot to sit and work in here. I'm gonna get the starter out and take it apart on the bench and just see if I can clean up the contacts and armature and commutator and maybe grease up the Bendix and stuff like that. Just make sure that thing's good to go. Nothing worse than a boat that doesn't start. So let's get the starter out of there. Starter's out. Wasn't the worst, wasn't the best. Looks like it's already been replaced once, which makes sense. I mean, the boat's 22 years old. But this is the kind of corrosion and stuff that I was worried about, plus whatever's in the motor. So let's put this on the bench, blow it apart, and see what we can clean up. Everything in the starter cleaned up pretty good, except I noticed when I slid the brush plate off that none of the brushes sprung into place. These are supposed to have this spring pressure on the backside to constantly apply pressure on the brush face to the commutator, and all 4 of them are frozen. So I'm gonna try to lightly persuade them to start moving again, but if I can get that to happen, then I can put this thing back together, grease everything up, and hopefully it works. Just gave the brushes a light squeeze and they popped loose. They brought out a bunch of, junk that was sitting on them, but I think that'll work. I'm gonna try that. Found a socket the same size, 7/8 socket, to hold the brushes back and get them out of the way so that I can slide this into place. So now I'll see if I can just slide it on without losing the brushes. Just like that. Go. Sweet. Just got a few gallons of diesel. I'm gonna fill the crankcase with, I don't know, maybe 2 gallons, and that way when I start put the starter back in and start cranking it over, that diesel can maybe just kind of help clean things up in the bottom, and then I'll siphon that all out and I'll put motor oil in. Starter's back in. Now I'm gonna take the time to go through a few electrical things. So there's like, I forget what this fuse is for. Access, it's labeled, and then there's a spare. So that connector looks good and it's weather tight. The fuel pump one looks good. I'm gonna pop open this relay, make sure it looks good. Clean up the contacts on the resettable 50 amp breaker here. Probably take those off and just clean them up. There's a big kind of wiring bulkhead right here at the back of the engine with the alarm. I'll see if I can unplug that stuff and just take a quick look at it. And then I still want to blow out the distributor. Yeah, and start putting a few things back. I gotta put the water pump, gotta put that water pump impeller back on the front of the engine. I really wanted to leave the alternator, but I really don't love the way it looks in there. So I think I'm gonna pull the alternator off, pull it apart, just clean it out, put it back together. Especially based on what I saw with the starter and how the brushes were frozen in their holder. So I think I'll just take this off, take it apart, and do the same thing. All right, you can probably see some of the corrosion down in there. I just don't know how bad it is. It sounds good as you roll it around. It doesn't make any noise. But I figure it's easy enough to just split it in half and kind of clean the big chunks off and make sure all the contacts are good, put it back together. I'm at the point where I want to crank the engine over with no spark plugs in it. Got the water pump put back together. Still need my carburetor fuel bowl gasket. Got the oil filter off, the crankcase full of diesel. Battery's in and hooked up after charging. I haven't turned the battery switch on yet. Let's turn this on, see if anything catches on fire. Well, that was not dramatic. All right, I don't have the keys yet. The guy didn't, he couldn't find them when I picked the boat up. He's since found them, but he hasn't mailed them to me or dropped them off yet. So I'm gonna get some little jumper wires out, crawl under the dash and figure out how to hotwire this thing so I can crank it over. All right, under the dash, we got power at the fuse strip. We got power at the harness going to the key. So just got to figure out which one goes to crank and which one goes to ignition. And then I should be able to jumper them. I went ahead and pulled the ignition fuse and put it in an empty slot and then clipped my test lead onto that. So even though I'm jumping right now, I'm fused. And then I remember on the starter, the red with yellow tracer was the crank signal. So I'm gonna hit those. See if it lights. Oh yeah. Nice. So there's the engine spinning with no spark plugs in it. So obviously no cranking compression. All right, should probably drain the crank, do that a little bit, and then drain the crankcase of the diesel I poured in it and get ready for some engine oil. Pretty exciting. Okay, I've cranked it over with about a gallon of diesel in the crankcase and no oil filter on it. I don't know, 30 seconds a minute, whatever. I pump that out. It's definitely just a nasty milkshake. So I put another gallon of diesel in it and I'm gonna crank it over some more and then pump that out. And my plan's I bought 5 gallons of diesel. My plan is to do that until it hopefully looks something like diesel. And then I'll put, bought enough oil and filters for 2 oil changes. So once it kind of looks like diesel, I'll throw a filter on it, put oil in it, and then hook everything back up and put spark plugs in it and see if it starts. Let's do a little cranking. Got the old gasket cleaned up off the carburetor bowl. Like I said, everything in here seems to function good. Accelerator pump diaphragm feels fine. So I picked up just a cheapo kind of gasket kit. Put a new bowl gasket on, put this on, and hook the fuel system back up. I'm still waiting on the local O'Reilly. They cross-referenced this fuel filter, ordered me a new one, because I'm still getting, this is what I poured out of the filter. I think you could probably see the separation line there. So I've still got some water for sure coming through the fuel system. probably pump one more sample out of the tank and just make sure the tank's producing clean gas now. And then when the new filter shows up, I'll put that on. But I put the distributor cap back on. I'm hoping, that's my biggest concern at this point, is that the distributor just might not work because it got wet, but it looks fine. It's a magnetic style pickup. So hopefully those electronics are still good. And I keep flushing the engine with, I put about a gallon of diesel in it, crank it over for 30 seconds with no spark plugs, let it sit, and then pump that diesel out. And I keep doing that, trying to get it to just look more like diesel instead of, you know, like tan colored coffee. And I think I'm finally getting there. So I'll probably pump this next batch out, put an oil filter on it, pour some oil in, get everything hooked back up, and then I'm pretty close to actually seeing if the thing will start. O'Reilly had a deal going for like the 5-quart jug of oil and a filter for 26 bucks. So I just got 2 of those. So the plan is just to, I don't know, maybe start with the 520, run it for 5 minutes, shut it off, dump that, and then put the 1030 and a new filter in. No real logic, I don't know. I don't think it matters. I think the important thing is just flush it quick, get the water out of the fuel. Put this on and check one more thing off the list. I don't have the keys for the boat yet, so I've got the ignition circuit jumped right now, and then I've got this lead coming off the starter, and then I can put on the battery positive, and then I'll control the ignition hot with the battery switch. I'm still waiting on the fuel filter, but I've got oil in it, a filter. I put all the plugs back in it. I'm leaving the choke disconnected for now. The power steering pump's disconnected. Mechanically, I feel pretty good about the engine. I'm mostly concerned about spark, so I'm just gonna hit it with some carbon choke cleaner and give it a quick crank and see if it coughs and stumbles. Let's see what happens here. All right, well there you go. You heard it go. There's a little bit of clatter, which is to be expected. I'm sure the lifters are collapsed or full of water or whatever. So I'm gonna clean up. I've got a pretty good mess going here right now. I'm gonna clean up a bit and see if that fuel filter showed up at O'Reilly yet. And once I get it started, I need to get water into the cooling system, into the impeller, so I don't melt that rubber impeller wheel. So I got to figure out if I'm going to dip the outdrive in a bucket, or if I can put some boat ears on it or what. So all right, it's pretty awesome. Let's keep going. I want to be able to run the electric trim up and down. The reservoir for the trim motor was full of water. I had previously siphoned that out. I cracked this line to see what came out, and it looked really red and free of water. So I'm thinking maybe just the water's in the reservoir. So I'm gonna fill that full ATF and check the trim motor function here, because it'd be nice. The goal is honestly to lower the drive unit, pull this access cover that gives me access to the dipstick for the lower drive oil, because before I run it for any length of time, I want to make sure that it has oil in it. I don't want to do something dumb and burn up a bearing. There's no reason it shouldn't have oil in it, but I just want to make sure. The trim motor powered it right down. I mean, it looks like maybe this cylinder's pretty dark. It might have a pre-existing leak, I'm not sure, but I was also wrong. The oil dipstick's not under this cover, it's this right here, and it's clearly full of oil. So I'm not gonna worry about that right now. I'm gonna leave it. And one step closer to running it. I didn't have it running long before I realized that I checked that I was getting good fuel flow into the bowl, and the accelerator pump circuit was working and squirting fuel, but there was no fuel going in and atomizing at idle all I had previously done was just pull the bowl off and just kind of clean out what I saw, but clearly there's some sort of idle circuit passage or something that's plugged up. So this time I'll take the carburetor a little farther apart and see what else I can find. Just a bunch of calcium. These are the main jets, but I'm sure that won't focus. But there's some debris in there, so clearly I just thought I'd get lucky and maybe the carburetor was so wet that it would be okay, but there was a decent amount of corrosion, kind of the white dusty corrosion on the metering plate, so I would imagine that one or more of these passages was blocked. So I blew them all out with some carbon choke cleaner, some compressed air, and then I just had it soaking in WD-40. So blow this off one more time and then put this whole thing back together and see if we have an idle circuit. Let the boat run probably, I don't know, 20 minutes. And this is the oil coming out of it now. See if I can show you what it looks like. So it looks like coffee with creamer. I imagine this is gonna exist for a bit of time. So I'll change the filter, put fresh oil in it, run it some more, but I don't know how long it's gonna take for this to go away, get all the water out of there.